I stood in her new apartment, the smell of fresh paint still clinging to the walls. Everything looked new, too deliberate, as if she had scrubbed every trace of me out of the air. She didn't expect me to come, not today, and certainly not with blueprints rolled under my arm. The man beside her froze when he saw me. He wasn't supposed to be there, at least not in my story. I smiled, calm, almost kind. "Let's redesign this place together," I said. Her lips parted, a whisper of disbelief. He took a step forward, tense. They both thought I was insane. Maybe I was. But all I wanted was for her to see what an empty house truly feels like. My name is Raymond Collins. I'm 45 years old, an interior designer in Seattle. For 20 years, I've built homes for other people, warm spaces, balanced lines, rooms that make strangers feel safe. I thought I knew how to build happiness. I thought I understood the architecture of love. I was wrong. My wife Laura and I have been married for 2 decades. 20 years of shared mornings, quiet dinners, and the gentle routine of 2 people who no longer needed words to understand each other, or so I believed. I knew her taste in colors, her favorite coffee, the way she hummed when she was writing. I knew the sound of her footsteps in every room. But one morning, she stood by the window, eyes distant, and said softly, "Ray, I think I need to live on my own for a while." That single sentence rearranged everything inside me. It was like hearing a wall crack behind fresh paint, quiet, almost invisible, but once you hear it, you know it's there forever. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. Maybe because I was afraid of the answer. Maybe because deep down, I already knew. I'm a man who fixes spaces for a living, but nothing in my career prepared me for the emptiness that follows when someone decides to redesign their life without you. That day, I didn't realize it yet, but I had just stepped into the most painful blueprint of my life. She moved out quietly, like someone slipping out of a dream. No arguments, no broken glass, no raised voices. Just a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'll still come by sometimes." I watched her pack the last of her notebooks, the ones she said she needed for inspiration. She smiled faintly and said, "It's just for a little while, Ray. I need space to write. Don't worry." I wanted to believe her. I really did. 20 years together had taught me to read the smallest changes in her tone, the pauses between her words. But that day, I chose silence. Maybe I was too proud to ask or too scared to know. After she left, the house felt too big. The air carried her absence like a scent I couldn't wash away. I kept busy, rearranged the living room, repainted the study, tried to make the space breathe again. When that didn't help, I turned to the kitchen. That kitchen had been ours. I could still hear her laughter echoing off the tiles, still see the flour on her cheek when she baked. I thought, maybe if I redesigned it, gave it new life, it would quiet the ache. So I worked until dawn, sketching every line, every counter, every light, but when I stepped back, the room still felt hollow. Late one evening, I ordered materials online, tiles, handles, wood panels. When the confirmation email arrived, I noticed something strange. The system showed a new address saved under her name, Fremont, a small apartment northwest of the city. My chest tightened. Fremont wasn't far, but it felt like another world. I stared at the glowing map on my screen, at the red pin pulsing like a heartbeat. For a long time, I told myself it was just a studio, a place for her writing. But something deeper whispered otherwise. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the half-finished kitchen around me, the smell of paint mixed with the silence. She needed space. She needed freedom. And maybe she needed someone else. Still, I refused to believe it. Not yet. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and told myself it was just temporary. Just another project waiting to be finished. But even then, somewhere inside me, I knew. No design could fill the empty shape she left behind. I told myself it was just a short visit, nothing more. A quick drop-off, a polite conversation, and I'd leave. But even as I stood in front of her new apartment door, something inside me hesitated. I could hear faint music through the thin walls, a melody I didn't recognize. It wasn't ours. When she opened the door, Laura looked surprised and a little afraid. "Raymond," she breathed, forcing a smile. "What are you doing here?" "I was nearby," I said softly, holding out a small package. "You forgot this at the house." She took it from me with trembling hands. "You didn't have to." The apartment smelled of coffee and rain. Warm light fell across a small desk stacked with books and papers. On the wall, she'd hung one of our old photos, a sunset from our anniversary trip. I tried to read the room the way I read every space I entered, the color, the symmetry, the story hidden in objects. But what I felt was dissonance. She gestured around awkwardly. "It's just a place where I can write in peace. Nothing fancy." "Peace," I echoed, stepping inside. My eyes wandered, almost unintentionally. 2 cups of coffee sat on the counter, steam still curled from one of them. Near the sofa, 2 pairs of slippers, one blue, one gray. For a second, I stopped breathing. My hand brushed the edge of a table she must have bought recently. Smooth wood, warm tone, not her usual taste. She noticed where I was looking and said quickly, "A friend helped me move some things in. You know how bad I am at furniture." I nodded, pretending to believe her. "A friend," I repeated. "Right." She avoided my gaze. I could feel the distance between us thickening, like walls closing in. I said goodbye quietly, letting her walk me to the door. Outside, the air was cool and heavy with the smell of asphalt. I walked toward my car, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen meant nothing. People have guests, people share coffee. It didn't have to mean betrayal. Then I saw it. A black Volvo turning into the parking lot, slowing in front of the building. My heart stumbled. The license plate, I knew it. Years ago, I'd watched that same car pull up outside my old studio, its owner stepping out with sketchbooks and raw ambition. Ethan Moore, my student, my protege, the one who used to ask about design philosophy, about how emotion lives inside space. The one who once said, "You build rooms that make people feel safe, Mr. Collins. I want to learn how to do that." Now, he was parking outside my wife's apartment. He stepped out with a casual ease, grocery bag in hand, sleeves rolled up, a familiarity that didn't belong. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and didn't care. I stood there, frozen behind the wheel, watching him disappear into the same doorway I had just left. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, a man who designed beauty for others but couldn't recognize the cracks in his own life. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt sharper. The ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the emptiness breathing beside me. 2 cups of coffee, 2 slippers, a car I knew too well. The details were small, almost invisible, but in design, the truth always hides in the smallest lines. A week passed, 7 long days of pretending to work, of answering emails I couldn't read, of sketching lines that led nowhere. Every design I touched fell apart halfway through. My mind wasn't on the projects. It was on her, on that apartment, on the small, stupid details that wouldn't stop echoing. The 2 mugs, the slippers, the car. One night, I picked up my phone and called her. She answered after a long pause. "Raymond?" "Laura," I said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." Silence. "You're not alone there, are you?" For a few seconds, all I heard was breathing. Then she whispered, "Ray, please don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it already is." The line went dead. I sat there in the dark for a long time, the phone still in my hand. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove to Fremont. I didn't think. I just moved, like a man walking toward a fire he already knows will burn him. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised, just tired. "Raymond," she started, her voice trembling. Behind her, he appeared. Ethan. The same confident face I'd once admired for its hunger to learn. Now, that same hunger looked misplaced, almost guilty. He tried to straighten up, as if politeness could fix what had already broken. "Mr. Collins, I raised a hand. "You don't have to explain." For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence was heavy, but not angry. I stepped inside slowly, my eyes tracing the space like I would a client's home. Every piece of furniture was carefully chosen: warm wood, neutral tones, framed art, soft light. It was tasteful, perfect, but sterile. I turned in a slow circle, letting the weight of the room settle around me. Then I looked at her. "Design's beautiful," I said softly, "but it's missing something." She frowned. "Missing what?" I let my eyes linger on the walls, the light, the hollow air between them. "A soul." No one spoke. Ethan shifted awkwardly, and Laura's eyes glistened with something between guilt and realization. I walked toward the door, my steps echoing faintly against the wood floor. Before leaving, I looked back once more. Not at her, not at him, but at the space they had built together. It was everything a designer could admire, yet nothing a husband could call home. And in that moment, I knew I had already lost her long before she left. What stood before me wasn't betrayal anymore. It was absence. And absence, I realized, has its own kind of architecture. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing their faces, not angry, not defiant, just caught. The next morning, I drove straight to my office, opened my planner, and filled out a new project form under my company's name: Fremont Apartment Renovation, Client L. Collins. My assistant raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that your wife?" I smiled faintly. "Ex-client. Let's keep it professional." 2 days later, the contract was signed. She must have agreed out of shock or guilt. I didn't ask which. When I showed up with a team of workers and blueprints, Ethan was there, pacing near the kitchen. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You can't be serious, Mr. Collins. You can't just walk in here and—" "I can," I interrupted calmly, rolling out the design sketches. "This project is legally under my firm." She signed the papers. Laura's hands shook as she looked at me. "Raymond, what are you doing?" "I'm working," I said quietly. "You said this place was where you wanted to start over. Then let's make it something worth living in. If this is your new home, at least let it have a soul." Ethan stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "You're trying to control her. This isn't design. It's punishment." I looked at him, unblinking. "You mistake reflection for revenge." He didn't understand. Neither of them did. But I wasn't there to destroy. I was there to show. Every wall, every light, every subtle curve of the space, I rebuilt it not for beauty but for truth. I turned their apartment into a mirror. In the living room, I placed a single hanging lamp, its light falling unevenly on 2 chairs facing opposite directions. In the kitchen, I replaced the old tiles with cold white marble, elegant but distant. I painted one wall in soft blue, the same shade as her favorite dress, but left the opposite wall untouched, bare concrete, the color of absence. When Laura walked through the half-finished space one afternoon, she stopped in the middle of the room. "What are you trying to say with this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "That even beauty," I said, "can't hide what's empty." She turned away, tears forming. Ethan muttered something under his breath and left the room. I stayed behind, tightening a screw on a frame, steady, composed. Every sound of hammer and drill echoed like confession. Every nail I drove in felt like sealing a memory into the walls. I wasn't fixing their home. I was burying ours. At night, when the workers were gone, I stayed alone in the dim light, sketching new lines across the floor plan. It wasn't about design anymore. It was about truth, and how truth, once built, can't be painted over. I made that apartment into a story neither of them could escape. A place where every perfect corner whispered what they'd tried to forget, that a house without love is only a room pretending to be alive. At first, she tried to live with it. The new furniture, the polished walls, the precise lighting, all of it was perfect on paper. Clients would have paid a fortune for what I built there. But design isn't about perfection. It's about presence. And mine lingered in every inch of that apartment like a shadow that refused to fade. Laura started to move differently, slowly, cautiously. She avoided the blue wall, the one I'd painted to match her favorite dress. She said it made her feel strangely watched. She turned off the hanging light at night because it reminded her of something she couldn't name. Even the sound of the floor creaking beneath her feet carried my rhythm, the echo of my pacing, the way I used to walk through our old house late at night, thinking about color and space and us. Ethan noticed it too. He'd catch her staring at the walls, her fingers tracing the texture like she was trying to feel for something beneath the paint. One evening he said, "You need to stop thinking about him. He's gone." But she didn't answer. She just smiled sadly and said, "No, he isn't." Days passed, and tension grew like cracks under pressure. Ethan began to feel it, the quiet resentment, the invisible comparison. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't blind either. "Do you even love me?" he asked one night, "or am I just living in his design?" Laura didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. The apartment itself turned against them. The mirrors in the hallway multiplied their reflections until even they didn't recognize themselves. The single chair in the living room became a symbol neither could sit on. The air grew heavy, like memory had weight. Every detail I left behind, every angle, every shadow, became part of her undoing, not out of spite, out of truth. She'd wanted a place to start over. I'd given her one that reminded her what she'd lost. One night, while the city outside buzzed with distant life, Laura sat alone at her desk. The pages of her unfinished novel lay open, blank. The words wouldn't come. The apartment around her felt like a confession she hadn't written. She looked at the clock, then at the door. By morning, she was gone. When I arrived the next day to collect the final documents, the door was unlocked. Inside, everything was still, a faint scent of perfume, a cup half full of cold coffee, a single folded note left on the counter. It read, "You've won, Ray, not with anger, but with understanding." I stood there for a long time, holding the note between my fingers. There was no triumph in it, no satisfaction, just quiet, the kind that follows after the truth is spoken and there's nothing left to say. I looked around the apartment one last time, at the light that fell unevenly, at the colors that had once meant love, now turned hollow, and I realized she was right. Understanding is its own kind of victory, but it doesn't make the emptiness hurt any less. He came back to the old house one late afternoon, the same way he used to come home from work, quietly, without hurry. The air inside was still. Dust drifted in the light from the window, landing on furniture that had not been moved since she left. Laura was already there, sitting on the couch, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. She looked smaller somehow, like the house had grown around her absence. When she saw him, her eyes filled, but no words came out. For a while they just sat there in silence. The sound of the clock was the only thing between them. It was the same clock they'd bought on their 10th anniversary, still ticking, still patient. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling. "I couldn't stay there, Ray. That apartment, it wasn't home. It was a reflection of everything I broke." He nodded slowly. "It wasn't meant to trap you," he said. "It was meant to remind you." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Remind me of what?" He looked around the room, their photographs, the faint scratches on the dining table, the chair she used to read in. "That a home isn't walls or color, Laura. It's presence. It's where hearts stay, not just bodies." She covered her face and sobbed softly. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach for her. He simply let the moment breathe. When her crying faded into quiet, he said gently, "I never wanted to win. I just wanted you to understand. A house can't have a soul if the heart has already left." Laura looked up, her eyes red, her voice barely above a whisper. "You always understood things too deeply, Ray. I'm sorry I learned it too late." He smiled, a sad, tired smile, and pulled a small envelope from his jacket. Inside was the divorce paper. "I thought we should finish what's already undone," he said. She nodded. No anger, no bitterness, just acceptance. She signed, her hand trembling slightly. When she passed the pen to him, their fingers brushed, one last touch, weightless and final. They sat there a few minutes longer, watching the sunlight slide across the floor. Then she stood, wiping her eyes. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. He nodded once. "You too." When the door closed behind her, the house was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. And for the first time in months, Raymond breathed without pain. Because forgiveness, he realized, doesn't rebuild what's lost. It just allows the ruin to rest. The apartment was finished. Every wall, every line, every corner had found its balance. The noise of drills and hammers was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of morning light filtering through the wide window. For the first time, the place felt still. Not empty, not haunted, just still. I stood in the center of the room, holding the last piece in my hands. A framed canvas. Simple, white, unassuming. In neat black letters, it read, "Home is where forgiveness lives." I hung it above the doorway, exactly at eye level. The first thing you'd see walking in, the last thing you'd see walking out. For a while, I just stared at it. The sunlight shifted, touching the frame, making the words glow faintly. Behind me, the apartment stretched wide and quiet, a space that had once been heavy with grief now breathing again. Not because it had been perfected, but because it had been accepted. Forgiveness, I realized, is also a kind of design. It takes patience, space, and a willingness to live with what's imperfect. I walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up. Buses rumbling, children laughing somewhere below, the world moving forward, unbothered by my small story of loss and rebuilding. I rested my hand on the cool glass, watching the reflection of the room behind me. Clean lines, soft light, peace where pain used to echo, and I heard my own voice in the quiet. "I used to believe I built homes," I whispered. "But maybe it was the homes that taught me how to keep a soul." The morning light grew warmer, flooding the floor with gold. I didn't move for a long time. There was no need. The work was done, not just the apartment, but the part of me that had needed to build it. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, not because I'd healed completely, but because I'd finally understood. Love creates, loss teaches, and forgiveness is where we live when the building is done.